crap. It's another Thursday night with Real Monsters. I'm your host, S.K. Barrett. Joining me is the always lovely and talented Wess Haubrich.
Hello, hello, hello.
And
I
we
am
got.
putting on my Tarzan outfit for this one because it's so damn warm in Alaska, but we will get to that.
Yeah, we're going to Alaska today in
We
our
are.
storytelling.
The
Uh,
the
yeah. Hey, I got a question for you.
mhm.
Do we have any history?
Yes, I do have a few items. Uh, let's see. August 29, 1985, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker of LA fame, confesses to police to avoid a lynch mob. Evidently, he was beaten within an inch of his life before this.
Whoa. So citizens caught him,
Yes.
essentially.
Yep.
Well, can't
As
wait
will
to cover
happen.
him.
Oh, man. Yeah, but see, August 30th, 1995, we talked a bit about this guy, Moses Sitole, I think is how you pronounce that last name. South Africa's most prolific killer,
Ah,
kills his 24th. And get this, a whole 4 days later, he kills his 25th.
wow. This is in South
Yeah,
Africa, right?
yep,
Right.
it is. Um, August 31, 1888, Jack the Ripper kills his first, Marianne Nichols. Uh,
Hey, Jack gets started.
he did. September 1st, 2005, the chief suspect in Natalie Holloway's disappearance is released from Aruban custody. Is the Dutchman Joran Van Der Sloot. Let's see.
And he
Mm-hmm.
was he wasn't the one who did it though, right?
I don't think they ever really caught anybody, though. I
Okay.
forgot the evidence that they had on Vandersloot, but yeah, I don't think they ever caught anybody with that. Um, but yeah, some interesting news throughout the week, too. August 30th, Sirhan, the guy who killed Bobby Kennedy,
Yeah.
stabbed in prison.
Ah, yeah.
I,
Wow.
Last I heard, he's in stable condition at an outside hospital. Evidently, they had him down in San Diego at one of those prisons. Um, Simone Biles' brother, involved in a triple murder. A mass shooting you might not have heard about. 9 injured at a Mobile, Alabama high school football game. Nobody dead in it, but still a mass shooting.
Huh. What year?
Yeah, it's this year,
Mm.
this past week. Yeah, it was August 31 for that one.
Shit. No, I did not hear about that one.
And the same day, two men caught in France for using a barbecue tool and a some other type of knife to attack several people. 1 dead, 6 injured. Um, let's see. Same week, the Odessa shooter, apparently, we are learning, tried to contact FBI and local law enforcement before that happened. So
Tried?
tried a few different times. Apparently, he was saying that I'm going to do something because I was fired and then women troubles. I don't know why that got put on the back burner, but it apparently did. Um,
That's
so
weird. That's not good, and that's all kinds of fishy,
it
right?
is.
To
Wouldn't be the
have
first time, though, with these either
to
that
have
happened.
somebody, you know, you know, call them up to say announce that they're going to do it,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
then
To have
but
that
get
direct
blown off.
line. Yeah. And I was just thinking like the Parkland shooter, but that was indirect that they were alerted about him. So yeah, good point on that. And then the only other one that stood out, only other, 14-year-old in Alabama confesses to killing his father, his stepmother, and 3 younger siblings with a gun. Pending adjudication, could face adult charges. So that is all that I have for this week on the news and history front.
Okay. So we have a guy who really should, I don't know. It's weird to say this, but it should be more famous, I guess. More well known, infamous,
Yeah.
something. I mean,
If you're gonna total it by body count,
he's got a
yeah.
he's got a bigger body count than say Son of Sam by a long
Yep.
ways.
Oh yeah. And he even beats the typical of about 12 victims that we see with, your run-of-the-mill killer.
Yeah,
And that's on the conservative side too. Don't
right.
forget we have another whole side to that, and we'll get to it.
So tell us
Um,
about this guy.
Robert Christian Hansen. You may know him as the hunter or the butcher baker of Alaska fame. But he was not born there. He was born in 1939 in Esterville, Iowa, to a rather hard-nosed Dutch family. His father was apparently a bit of an authoritarian, and his mother was the exact opposite. I don't know if you could say permissive, but she wasn't so hard-nosed with Hansen as the dad was, who was also a baker. And after that, things just kind of went downhill for this guy for most of his life. Not that I feel pity for him, but you start things off. He's a sickly child. He's underdeveloped in the physical arena, and I think that kind of gets into the emotional too down the line. You'll see the same thing, but most of where
I'm already making some, drawing some lines here from what I've heard already. But go on.
oh, absolutely, but yeah, the main source that I used to put together his background for the background part of this was an interesting study, a psychobiographical study of Robert Hansen, the butcher baker.
Yeah.
And the background for this is something that I had never heard of before, but it was very interesting. It's called serial murder as a Shahryar syndrome. I'm not sure where they get that, but it's SCHAHRIAR from a paper published in 1999. Not sure where they get that term though. But this takes a look at serial murder as a psychiatric syndrome. And for the purposes of discussion, syndrome just meaning a constellation of symptoms, if you will, that are gathered together. And they had a total of 5 of them for this as Shahryar. The first symptom is omnipotence. Sometimes you can get this with killers feeling like they're grandiose and above the law, but it can also mean the power struggle that you see happen with a lot of these guys. Like, let's say their power is taken from them early on in life with something like child abuse. And they're always seeking to right that. So that is a large part of what the omnipotence is. The second part is sadistic fantasies, fairly self-explanatory.
Right.
The
and
third,
very common.
yes, absolutely. The third symptom in this is what they call ritualized performance. This is where the MO, the modus operandi of the killer, starts to get more and more solid, more and more ingrained, more and more ritualized with what they do at each crime scene. And interestingly, the people who put forth this theory say that it often functions as a substitute for human communication in their larger life.
You kind of get that from strongly from, say, Ed Kemper
Hmm.
and Ed
Absolutely.
Gein
Oh yeah, in different ways,
in
but
different
yeah,
ways, but the same concept for sure.
absolutely. I would definitely agree. That the fourth part of this is dehumanization, which again I think is self-explanatory.
Hmm.
Um, and then number five is one of the more interesting parts of it, what they call symbiotic merger. And what this means, it's essentially the offender, the killer, symbolically merging himself with the victim, and it's sometimes literally doing that. Because this can be done through rape, sodomy,
Mm.
cannibalism, blood drinking, all those sorts of things. But it can
Okay.
also be done in more latent ways. I think probably the best example of it was BTK.
I was just thinking the same thing because he would do a lot of the same things to himself
Exactly.
that he did to his
Yep.
victims.
Yep.
And he took
Yeah.
pictures. What a
He
fuckhead.
did. Yeah, he did, man. But yeah, they applied this background to understanding Hansen's life. And they ended up dividing his life into 5 different sections. So the first one is what they called the overworked / resentful child. And that was age 0 to 12 years old.
Okay.
And with that, you have, being born in 1939, Esterville, Iowa. Um,
Which
he was,
is still in the throes of the deception,
oh,
the
absolutely.
depression.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
being up
hard
there, I mean,
times.
it's,
Hard
yeah.
times.
Oh, yeah. And up there, it's like maybe, I don't know, half an hour from the border with Minnesota. So,
Oh
and
God,
it's
really?
about, yeah. Well, thanks for that, as I have Minnesota blood. But yeah, the population in 2010 was only 6,300 people
Oh,
in
okay.
Esterville. So, um, but Hansen, ever since an early age, was often forced to work long hours at the family run bakery by,
Ah,
again, the domineering Dutch father.
right.
Um, yeah. And this, in addition to being a sickly child, being a diminutive little guy, basically. Um, and his mother would quite often acquiesce to the domineering father and everything that would be entailed with that.
Well,
Uh,
interestingly, I think that having that dichotomy in the parents probably brought on the sense of, um, the uh, dissatisfaction with his childhood as much as anything. I mean, if both parents are one way and you don't have a lot of knowledge of other ways to be,
mhm,
it's it's a lot easier to accept your circumstances. But if you have one parent, being a hard ass and another parent trying to soften everything up, then you're going, what the fuck? Which is the right, which is the thing I should,
mhm.
accept?
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
obviously
And
you get
wires get crossed.
wires get crossed, your signals get crossed, and you do become resentful. Why not? Why wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Um, and to make matters worse for his early life, he started developing a horrible stutter, which will come into play
Oh
much
yeah,
later on in a very interesting way,
right,
nonetheless.
right.
But he also had just horrible acne, and he would often call himself later on in life a one giant pimple.
Yeah.
Um, but that he was often described also as pockmarked throughout. So
Okay.
that's a bit of his childhood there. Um, Moving into the next phase, they called the rejected loner. That was age 13 to roughly 20. Um, After graduating high school, he enlists in the army, right? And this totally floored me. He had the gall to apply to be a drill instructor.
In the
You
army.
overcompensate. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You overcompensate much? Damn. This guy,
Well,
a drill
I don't know.
instructor.
It's kind of like he's trying to be like his dad, right?
Yeah, could be. That's probably it.
Maybe win
I
his
just lived,
approval.
yeah, to where good sense goes out the window. But yeah, and he did that, and he also applied to be military police. He was stationed in New Jersey at the
Okay.
time, and he had his first sexual experience with a prostitute there.
Ah.
Um, and this is also when he started frequenting them, and he found a couple of things out about himself then. First, he hated quickies, and two, he liked, quote, taking control.
Mm.
Not really a surprise there, but um, this is when things start to get interesting. When you get into the third stage, they called it the sadist in the making, age 21 to 31. Um, so Hansen, after his about 1 or 2 years in the Army, returns to Pocahontas, Iowa, where he went to high school.
Was it was how did he get out that quickly?
You know, I was wondering with that if it wasn't something that psych related.
Yeah, because
He got
that stuff doesn't just blossom one day out of nothing.
no, and it doesn't. And Hansen has more than his share of running into the system in some capacity and
Hmm.
getting out because of a psych issue or because of um, they want to just be lenient on him. I guess you could, in a way, call it privilege. In another way, maybe they thought, hey, this guy's not threatening, you know,
Right. Yeah,
despite all
he was
evidence to the contrary.
mm, he was a very effective manipulator of the system.
Oh, absolutely. And of people in general, too, which is going to
Yeah.
get into how he got the women that he killed to trust him, which is very important. But yeah, at age 21, he decides to burn down his old high school's Pocahontas, Iowa bus garage. Yeah, with his 16-year-old
Um.
buddy. So,
Uh. So was he now? Wasn't he working as a bus driver at the time, or had been?
from what I had seen, he was working at his dad's bakery
Oh, okay.
again,
Okay.
but I could be wrong there.
For some
That
reason,
might have
I
been.
had it in my mind that he did a stint as a bus driver for the school district, but maybe not.
He might have. I mean, that working for his dad, that could actually be after the 3 years that they sentenced him to an Iowa reformatory, gets out after 20 months,
Mm,
and then worked for his father. Yeah,
okay.
that's what I had. So maybe he was a bus driver beforehand, but yeah, it was the 16-year-old too who ratted him out, ratted both of them out about it.
Yeah,
So
one of them was feeling guilty.
yeah, man.
He,
But
yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing where a good manipulator would be able to take somebody who's got a little, rebelliousness in them, but isn't really a bad kid yet, and lead them one step at a time into something they wouldn't do on their own.
mhm. Yeah, kind of a grooming, if you will,
Well,
to
even in the very act, like, hey, let's just go to the school. Well, hey, let's just go into the bus barn. Well, hey, let's just, let's just do the
hmm
next thing. Let's just do the one next thing. And then before long, the whole fucking place is ablaze, and the kid's like, oh shit, what did I do?
yeah, well, man. But yeah, at any rate, that is how that
That
situation went down.
that's how a good
Um,
manipulator would do that.
well, I think Hansen was still kind of refining the manipulation thing around this time too.
Hmm.
But yeah, another interesting thing at this stage, his kleptomania became much more visible. And he was already inclined to petty theft quite a bit during this time,
Yeah.
but it just got way worse. There's a author with the last name of Duclos, Duclos, who wrote a book called Fair Game on Hansen, and he described it as Hansen would come close to, quote, ejaculating in his pants
Wow.
when he would steal items from a store. Yeah. But, this also started another problem for him. He was often arrested for this stuff, but he was rarely, if ever, charged for it. There, again, he's coasting with
Right.
the system. Yeah.
So just a speculation here, but if one of the first people he would have learned to manipulate was his own mother.
That's true.
And
It would.
when
Mm-hmm.
because she was trying to make things easier for him, right?
Yeah,
At
he
least
relied on her to an inordinate degree. Yeah.
right, but to you know, get him out of whatever trouble he was in with his dad, or not have to work so much, or chores, or who knows what. So he would have learned how to, get away with shit with his mom right from the early stages, and and probably by playing up his weakness with her
Mm-hmm.
to get
Oh,
her to
absolutely.
get her sympathies. And so
That's a great thing, to
yeah,
point out with that. Yeah, they said something similar in another bit I was reading there, but it was coming at it from the point of view of identity formation. To say that Hansen, from an early age, because of everything you just said, his
yeah.
identity was too closely tied to his mother's
Ah,
and not independent enough.
gotcha.
So their theory was that's what he was searching for throughout, much of this. But
His own identity.
yeah,
Okay.
a separate, independent identity. I think they were using Erickson's ideas on identity as their backdrop too for that theory. Eric Erickson, that is.
Okay. And as compared to, say, Freudian or Jungian or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Um, but at any rate, around 1967 is when he moves to Alaska and he gets married again. He was married for about 6 months and she divorced him when he was in the Iowa Reformatory. But he finds a different wife
Okay.
and he has 2 kids pretty quickly by her when they are up in Alaska. And this is also when he starts honing his skill as a hunter.
Now he has to earn a living up there. What's he doing?
Before this was an interesting part of it. Was that his wife, after he was caught, his second wife, said that they had essentially kept their money separate throughout most of it, but
Yeah.
it was her income as a tutor that was keeping the household afloat.
That's not much money.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
It really isn't. That's what she said though, which I don't know about theories as to why she would have said that, but he didn't. It would be about 14 years before he opened his bakery up there. From 67 to 81 when he opened it. Um, Before that, I don't know what he was doing as far as a job.
So 67
Hmm.
population of Alaska, holy shit, was 270,000.
Wow, man. Yeah, I think you should tell the listeners the figures on the land that you showed
Yeah,
me with that.
yeah.
That's just
So
amazing.
it's astonishing. So just so you know, um, so Alaska is, wait, let me get, is 500 million square miles.
Wow. Damn.
500 million square miles. It is seven
Jeez.
times the size of the United Kingdom.
Wow.
7 times. It's in 1977 when the population was, pretty close to double what it was when Hansen first moved there. It was 400,000. There
Mm-hmm.
was enough land for every person in the state to have 1.5 square miles of property.
Sheesh. Square miles, not
Square miles,
acres.
not acres,
Yep.
miles per
That's
human
amazing.
being, man, woman, child.
And I was just looking that up as a basis for comparison.
Yeah,
The total area of the state of Nevada, one that I would consider, pretty big by
it,
Illinois standards
it is
anyway,
big.
110,567 square miles. So what, not even a tenth of Alaska, if I
Yeah,
heard the figure correctly?
yeah.
Man.
So Nevada a little over, is just a little bigger than the UK,
Mm-hmm.
like 1.17 times the size of the UK.
Jeez. Just wrapping your mind around that. It's
And,
absolutely amazing.
and people, out here, I live in the West. Lived almost all my life in the Western United States, and it's big here, right? The West is
Mm-hmm.
big compared to the East, and the West is tiny compared to Alaska.
Jeez. And like I said, by Illinois standards, not Chicago standards, Illinois standards. Um, yeah, and another interesting thing during this time with Alaska was they were starting to build the 800 mile, is it? Alaska
Mm,
pipeline.
yeah.
So you were seeing not a whole hell of a lot of people relative to that landmass, but you were seeing more people there,
Well,
you know.
percentage wise of population, it was huge.
Mm.
It was a huge influx. So when did that start?
I wanted to say that was the early 70s, maybe.
Hmm.
But, and even at any rate, Alaska had only been a state for about, 20 years come 1979. Um, but this pipeline, it made a lot of the state, and especially Anchorage, the largest city, to be like Deadwood was for the Old West. Rowdy, rough and tumble, a den of vice, if you will,
Hmm.
in a lot of areas. But
Just to give you people an understanding, the population of the state almost doubled in the 70s.
wow, man,
In 10 years, it almost doubled.
sheesh.
So that's substantial, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Those are massive sociological changes. Um,
definitely.
and I do want to point out also your comparison to Deadwood. That was
Hmm.
Anchorage. That was the big city.
Yeah, yeah, this is true.
That's the
This is
city.
true. To my understanding, it had kind of an outsized reputation for that too, for what was going on. But
Well, it's Anchorage might have garnered some of the reputation that from the rest of the state, you know.
hmm
Uh, because Anchorage was the big city because you could get to it by boat.
That also the geographical gateway too, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah,
Most
that's
of the rest,
when.
yeah.
Um, by the way, there are a lot of towns in Alaska that you cannot drive to.
Have to have a plane or a boat,
Yes.
and that would very much factor into Hansen and what he would later do, because it was around that same time that he started to escalate. Um, that gets us into the fourth section on him, which was the trophy hunter, age 32 to age 44.
Okay.
And November 15th, 1971, the first time he attempted to kidnap that we know of. He attempted to kidnap a woman. Susie Hepburn was her name. Now, apparently, he just saw her when they were both stopped at a red light. She looked at him, and for whatever reason, in that screwed up little head of his, he thought, oh, she's saying, come and kidnap and rape me.
Well, there's talk of him being schizophrenic, so he might have actually heard that.
He might have. Schizophrenic was only one of them, though. He was also diagnosed bipolar. It
Jesus.
was, yeah. And it was actually from this case. That's where he got his court-ordered psychiatrist, Dr. Langdon. Um, Barely a month after Hepburn, he kidnaps and rapes an 18-year-old, Barbara Fields. He takes her to an isolated cabin where he took a girl, in quotes, 1 week before.
Hmm.
And Fields actually ended up pressing charges against him, even though what he said to her was essentially just shut up about what happened and I won't come after you. Everything will be fine. But she decided to press charges when they found a dismembered or discovered a body near that place where he took her.
Oh.
Um,
So she's thinking, you know what? A, I got off lucky, and B, um, this guy's trouble and he needs to be off the street. So kudos to her for coming forward on that.
oh, absolutely. It and this next part is probably going to really piss you off because it kind of did me. At his trial for this, Dr. Langdon said Hansen experienced periods of dissociation. And what does he recommend? Counseling and work release.
Um,
Yeah.
um, counseling for, Jesus. So he's really good at fucking with these people in the system.
Yeah, or this guy is just one huge ignoramus in a probably expensive suit.
Well, there was back in the 70s was kind of the start of this whole, you know, um this whole way of thinking about criminology. I was just reading about it today, where you need to you need to you know the criminals. It's not their fault. They're misunderstood and all this bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
when
where
it was really taking root.
wasn't that about the same time where they started the deinstitutionalization
Yes,
movement? Yeah,
yes.
good point. Huh.
Institutions were not very often good places, but a lot of bad shit has happened from kicking them out on the streets.
Yeah, and unfortunately, but man, and during all this, his wife supported him. That we know.
Literally,
Yes, yes, with the
not
money.
in his hobbies, but in his
No,
money.
yeah, financially supported him.
Yeah.
And it's around this time that he begins prowling Anchorage for other victims. Um, and that's where murder becomes ritual, like we were talking about.
Hmm.
Um, and interestingly, though, this kind of goes against the sadistic fantasies part of that. He would very often release women who were compliant,
Yeah,
and he
that's
would try to
really
rape them.
unusual because one of the things you see fair amount is these assholes start off as rapists, but then they realize, fuck, I could go to jail for that if they talk,
Hmm.
and so they turn to murder just to not get caught for rape.
That's very true. And also with
But
that,
then they find out that that's something they really like doing.
well, this is true. Doesn't compliance have a tendency to stymie a sadist, though, and just get them more frustrated and brutal?
Yeah, a lot of times, right? They want to struggle, they want a conflict, they want to fight, they want to
Hmm.
see terror.
Because they can't get off without it, man.
Yes, you know,
Yeah, Hansen
Bundy
was an
talked about
aberration.
that, about the thrill of seeing, the light go out
Hmm.
in those last
He did,
seconds.
man. But and then the other thing that he started doing, others he would prolong the torture of them wherever he had them. Then he would fly them in his plane to a secluded place, release, hunt, and kill them. And we will
Oh,
be getting more into that.
that's very much like one of our favorite books.
Yes, most dangerous game. Did you
Yeah.
happen to see where he admitted to reading that? I didn't see a source that said that Hansen read it.
No, but um, it was uh, what was it was around though when he was going to school though, right? Because the
Oh,
because the
absolutely.
movie is pretty old
The
itself.
movie was 1932,
So
so
it was even before he was born.
yep.
So and I remember, hell, my God, I think it was fourth grade teacher read the book to us.
Hmm. Yeah, just like that, and then Zodiac too.
Yeah.
But you know, the other thing here, when he would release these women in the wilds in the backcountry,
Hmm.
he would keep them blindfolded.
Oh, well, that's not very sporting.
Exactly. And he would most likely also keep the cuffs on them for that. Um, it just, when I was looking at that, that's immediately what I thought. It takes all the sport out of it. You're just a wannabe machismo bullshit artist
Hmm.
who says you like to hunt women, but you only like to hunt them if they're blindfolded and can't in any way try to evade you, basically.
He often would take their shoes, right? So
Yeah.
they're handicapped in multiple ways.
Yep.
They have no means of defending it. I mean, he doesn't want to make it a game.
No.
You
No,
know,
I mean, he really doesn't. He just wants something that's going to prop up his ego.
yeah.
But, it being where I'm from in Illinois, we are right near the county that is most populated with white-tailed deer. So hunting is a huge thing here.
Yeah.
People hunt for the venison. And in a lot of ways, Hansen kind of reminds me of the city slickers who
Oh,
come down
yeah.
and just want to, hunt to get a mount and nothing else. And oftentimes they will hunt deer that have been fed on, farms. They're not free range,
Right.
even.
Right.
All they want's a fucking trophy. And that was Hansen, too. All he wanted was a fucking trophy.
Well, again, as I say, I've lived almost all my life in the Western U.S. and there's a great disdain for city hunters. Yes, hunters
Hmm.
from the cities who don't know shit, who
Yep.
are disrespectful and of the animals even.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
you know, uh,
The hunters that I know, I don't hunt myself, but the ones that I know, take great reverence toward the animal when they're out there.
They
You know?
do. There's
Yeah.
massive respect for them and their abilities and and for you know Hollywood likes to portray hunters as cavalier about the killing, but the real hunters, the serious hunters, they're not like that at all.
No, not at all. And they're
They're not
closer to,
casual about it.
yeah, they're closer to a Native American
Hmm.
view of it almost.
Yeah. In fact, my oldest brother is he loves to hunt, and in fact, he's at the age of 70
Wow.
has enrolled in gunsmithing school.
Damn. It'd be interesting.
Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Hmm. Right.
And he is very much like that. He has studied a lot of Native American ways, and he's, yeah, very
Dang.
much. It doesn't take the killing lightly at all.
No. No, and that's the way that my uncle is too. Who, he hunts with a gun and with a bow.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and my cousin as well. Uh, yeah, that it just really stood out to me with Hansen, but it was 1971 when all that happened, and he started escalating more. Um, that was also when he had that bipolar diagnosis. They scripted him lithium, but there was no court order to take it. So God knows if that affected him or not.
Mm. Yeah, just to give people an idea, Anchorage is a city, and it's probably got like, I don't know, a significant percentage of the entire state population is in Anchorage and suburbs. Uh,
Wow.
um, I wouldn't be surprised if it was above 25%.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
and yet, one of the major causes of traffic jams in Anchorage are moose.
Yeah.
Because, of course, because moose are bigger than you think.
Oh, yeah. They have
And
the same
they don't
problem
give,
in Minnesota.
they're so big, they don't give a fuck about anything or anybody. They just go where they want.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Moose.
I've been within, 10 yards of a bull moose before.
Hmm.
And, of course, I was 14 at the time, but I would have had to have, you know, raised my hand way above my head to touch its back.
Oh, yeah. They're big, man.
They're huge.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and the point is that even though Anchorage is the city, it's barely carved out of the wilderness. Just
Hmm.
barely. It's just it's not just right on the edges of town. It comes into town. The wilderness. It walks into town. There's
Oh, yeah.
they've had a problem in the last couple of years of people in the suburbs out going for a walk or a jog with their little yapper dogs, and wolves run up and take them,
Wow.
right? Leash and all, just snatch them right away from the people and run off.
Dang.
So it is, as you say, it's the fucking Wild West.
Yep. And even more so back in the time we're looking at.
Yeah.
Uh, and after all that happened, he starts looking for more victims. And this is when Hansen first admits to his later confession that he first thought of hunting them was after all this happened in 1971.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, he had another weird thing that kind of drove him here that might explain a bit of that sadist behavior and being not so sadist. He tended to see women as a dichotomy of good girl or bad girl,
Ah.
in his words. It, good girl would be like the religious types, like his wife, who apparently thought she could fix him, and that's why she stayed as long as she did. And then, the bad girls, the hookers in the Tenderloin district of Anchorage, the strippers, the,
Yeah.
topless bartenders that he would pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, yeah, and I think, like we were saying too.
Is there an in between? Is there really?
Well,
I'm kidding, ladies. Jeez.
uh,
You know,
but
I a lot of guys think it's really interesting not to have a dichotomy, but a mix.
yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Y-
please understand, we are talking about a diseased mind here.
Yeah.
um, yeah, at any rate, it was September 12th, 1982, where you had these guys were actually cops who were out hunting at the Nick River. Is it Kunnick or is it Nick? Gnick.
Nick.
I don't know if that, Nick, yeah. They were out hunting and they come across, a foot sticking out of the riverbed. So they do what they do, and being
Right.
cops, this was a great thing. They knew not to disturb it any further.
Good for them.
Yeah, they,
Even back in the olden days, they knew.
but yeah, they got their people out there right away. And the way that they excavated it, I thought was really interesting. We have a picture of that, actually. They did it layer by layer,
Do
like
we
an
really?
archaeological dig. I think we have one of them sifting.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We do. Let me pull that one up separately.
They would do that literally layer by layer of soil in between taking pictures from all different angles. And while this is a new thing for them, certainly, dealing with homicides out there,
Yeah.
it's not it was not all that new for them at the time to be dealing with death out there. Because they would
No.
find, people who get trapped out there, hikers or what have you, somewhat often, but
Here's another aspect of Alaska life that is not often appreciated, and that is they didn't always know who was in the state and who wasn't.
no.
You know, people come up there, they get off the ferry boat or they drive up. They don't register anything. They might come into, if they're um, heading to the, going to create a new life in that, in the, I don't even know what the hell they call it, in the bush. Um, they might stop at a store and grab some supplies and then just disappear and hardly talk to anybody and may never be seen again.
Oh yeah, and that dynamic is actually kind of multiplied in the case of the sex workers and
Yeah,
people who were doing that then,
absolutely.
because of the nature of the work, but also because Anchorage would serve as sort of launching point for places like Seattle.
Yep,
They would send them to Portland too, and even Honolulu after there
yep.
was another big one. So it was not at all unusual for these girls to disappear, but
Right.
it soon happened. There was enough of them where they set up a task force.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's not at all uncommon for sex workers of various stripes to move to new towns because you know what? Guys see your face often enough, they want something new.
oh yeah, and not to mention staying ahead of the law too,
Well, there's
if you
that as
have
well.
to. Yep,
That's an important aspect. Yeah.
another reason they should legalize. um,
Yes.
yeah, the September 12th, 1982 body was waitress dancer Sherry Morrow, who was reported missing November 17th, 1981 by her boyfriend. Apparently, the last thing that she was going to do was go to a photo shoot with some unnamed man.
Mm.
which would become a commonality for the next one that disappeared, and that was Sue Luna.
Oh, was that a ruse he used?
Yes, he would
Uh,
often use the
the photo shoot,
photographer.
but he didn't have really anything to do with photography, right? It was all just
No,
it was all bullshit.
no, I don't even think he kept any Polaroids. He did keep trophies, as we were
Yeah.
talking about, um, which interestingly, that can be looked at as a type of symbiotic merger,
Oh
where
yeah. Yeah.
where he's making the victim a part of him or him a part of the victim. Um, but
Keeping them
yeah, I don't
close.
think he
Yeah.
even kept those. Let's see. And he was, a careful, organized killer. And as these other graves start popping up, most of them around the Nick River, um, they were excavated in the same manner as that first one, archaeologically and with a fine-tooth comb, basically. And that's where you also had some people saying that he was similar to the Green River Killer.
In
Was
which sense?
in how he disposed of the bodies, I think was the big thing.
Except Ridgway, he didn't bury him at all.
Eh,
He just dumped in out of the way places.
mm-hmm. And
Um,
maybe that was enough for him.
yeah.
I'm trying to look at it the way that they would have at the time too, because we have the benefit of
Well,
2020 vision
right,
looking back.
right, and they could have thought like, you know, this woman's buried in a shallow grave on the riverbank, but was she really buried, or was that just, you know, you know, gravel carried during the runoff that buried her?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That or even bears,
Right,
animals, wildlife,
right.
which disturbed a few of these graves too.
I'd
Um,
be surprised if that didn't happen, in fact.
oh yeah, and if they hadn't excavated these the way that they did, they might have missed the shell casings that were there too.
Ah,
Each
yeah.
one of these bodies had a shell casing from a 223 rifle.
Which is one of the popular chamberings for hunting and for the AR-15
Yes.
slash
Yep.
M16. Which, hey, guess what? He was Army.
Yep. He was.
So he
But
he that might be where he got. I mean, because you as a hunter you can select a wide range of calibers, but he would have been comfortable with the 223 from his Army training.
oh, absolutely. It's some people I was reading did ask the question why he didn't vary it up a little bit with that. But
Why didn't he police his brass?
yeah, might have bought him a little bit more time, but maybe like you were saying there, that became essentially part of his signature for what he did. And
Well,
signatures have a tendency not to change.
it's true. Plus the fact that, you know, you'd have to be frankly surprised to have any of these bodies found.
Oh yeah, getting grandiose a bit with it.
I mean, it's not unthinkable at all that you could, you know, dispose of just dump a body anywhere in Alaska and nobody would ever know it.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've talked about that a lot with the Pacific Northwest, but like you were saying,
Yeah, and then
this is
multiply
that
that
writ
by
much
7.
larger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. But yeah, police weren't getting much in the way of breaks until then. They even put two officers as undercover down in that Tenderloin district, and they started by segregating with Violent Johns, talking to the girls, seeing who was known to be violent or
Mm.
weird with their fetishes. And then they further whittled that list down by looking at who was charged with weapons or assault.
Hold
and
on.
with
Undercover as customers or as employees?
my understanding, barflies
Okay.
basically is what they were. But yeah, that nothing came of that. But the first really big break, I think you could argue, was June 13th, 1983. You had 17-year-old Oregon sex worker Cindy Paulson is found running down Fifth Avenue in Anchorage in basically just panties and handcuffs, screaming, "He's going to kill me." She flags down a passing motorist
I
and
thought I
directs
read
him
that
to a nearby motel.
that she was actually in the process of being chased. I mean, she wasn't just running, but wasn't he was he there too? Did I misread that?
You know, I think you might be right there. I didn't see anything definitive saying he was there, but um, you know, even if they were, she was at any rate picked up um, by a passing motorist and taken to where she was living at a motel while they called the cops. And she, after calming down, getting the cuffs off, and talking to a officer, Greg Baker of the Anchorage PD, which he would become pretty important in this as it keeps going. Um, she fingered Hansen. She fingered his car. She gave a description. And from there was how they found his house.
Hmm.
So they go there, they talk to him, and Hansen says, "This bitch just wants money, basically. She's trying to
Uh,
shake me down," is
uh,
what he tells them. And he gives his basically two buddies of his as an alibi for during this. Um,
Hold on, we haven't talked about the plane yet.
oh, no, we haven't. Now we can get into that. It was a part of Cindy Paulson's story that
Right.
she told the cops.
That's one of the ways they fingered him.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. The aircraft markings.
Well, she went up and pointed that one, didn't
Yeah.
she?
Yeah, I think she did that too. But she told a story of basically this guy pulls up in a car the other night and picks me up. And, we got a deal going. I'm going to do what prostitutes do. And basically, right when I get in the car, he handcuffs my wrist. The other end of the cuffs are to the seat, so I can't move. Pulls a gun and says, "You're coming with me." A pistol, that is. A wood handled revolver.
Okay, so this is really weird.
Yeah.
No, no, no. There's something else that's really weird. So when I went back to college when I was in my 30s, and they hadn't caught the Green River Killer yet. And I was in a creative writing class, and we were told to, write a short story about I don't even remember what, but I ended up writing a speculative story about the Green River Killer. Um, and one of the
Hmm.
elements that I put in there was handcuffs in the seat of his pickup. They knew the Green River Killer drove a pickup, but
Hmm.
the other end looped through the seatbelt um, strap,
Oh, uh huh.
just like you just described.
Interesting. Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, evidently Hansen refined that. Um, but yeah, she tells the story of after she's cuffed, they drive to what she described as a nice middle class house in a nice middle class neighborhood. Um, and he takes her to the den of the house, where there's mounts and trophies all along the walls, and apparently a pole somewhere towards the center where he cuffed her, and he kept her chained by the neck as well. And this is where he gets more than a little brutal. He was a biter, according to her,
Oh,
and he also raped her with a hammer, the
jeez.
handle of a hammer. Um, and then after that, he apparently just collapsed and took a nap right next to her.
Where's
which was
Mrs.
weird.
Hansen?
That actually comes into interesting play. This year, Hansen instituted what he called his Summer 83 plan. And what that basically involved was sending his 2 kids and the wife on a European vacation.
Well, obviously not just on a tutor's salary, so
No,
they're doing better. He started a bakery, right?
he did. He
And it
started
did
a
well.
bakery. Yes, in 1981 he started a bakery. And the interesting thing about that, he started it with ill-gotten gains from insurance fraud. The
What?
same the same money that he used to buy his plane, in fact. He apparently got all these mounts that he has, records for. He's literally in record books for. He got them all insured for an absurd amount of money. And I'll give you guys a little bit of an idea of just how absurd as soon as I tell the rest of this story.
Yeah.
But he gets them insured. He conveniently loses them, loses in quotation marks. He collects his
He didn't
ill-gotten
he didn't
gains.
burn them up in a fire?
Nope. He collects his ill-gotten gains from that, and then magically they reappear. But yeah,
Jesus.
just to get you guys an idea of how
Like,
absurd.
like, like, come on. These are animal heads
Yeah,
on plaques, right?
yeah, animal heads and some that are taxidermy,
That
which is
I mean,
expensive, but
yeah, but still,
still.
come on. That can't be worth anything.
We were wondering just how absurd this all got before we got on the air tonight, and I did a little search on eBay. The most expensive taxidermied animal that I found was
Yeah.
$17,500 for
What?
a ram mounted to a wall. Seventeen thousand five
That
hundred bucks.
is nuts.
Yeah,
What kind of animal was it?
it was just. Oh, I'm looking for it. I wish I had the. I don't know why it got closed. It was a ram, basically. I can bring it up again
Okay,
here while we're
okay,
talking.
okay. So let's just get past the whole concept of having animal heads in your house to begin with,
Yes.
which is creepy as fuck. Um,
Oh, I found it. It is. This is the title of the entry.
yeah.
Huge Grand Slam, including record book 197 and 4/8 inches, B&C Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep.
Wow.
So this would have been similar to what Hansen was known for hunting. My understanding, his records were mostly with Dahl sheep,
Okay.
DAHL.
Right.
I put it in there. $17,500. There's 23 watchers on it too.
Wow. But so these people want to own a animal head to put in their home or establishment that they didn't even fucking shoot.
Yeah, it kind of defeats
It's
the whole purpose,
it's
doesn't it?
unless they're gonna start lying about it.
Yeah,
But then it's like, so where has this ram's head been for 20 years?
exactly.
Because the
Oh,
plaque here says it was shot 20 years ago, and why is it just now showing up in your house?
yeah. Unless you
Oh,
have
that's
like a
so
hotel
bizarre.
or a lodge. I couldn't understand that at all. Unless you
Cause
had one of those things.
yeah, that's a shitload of money. Did can you do?
Yeah.
By the way, can you do dogs? I got a dog around here. What do dogs bring in?
Well,
I could use some cash.
literally all I did for that search was type in taxidermy on eBay.
Wow,
And, and then I went and I sorted it with most expensive first.
wow, that's
So, yeah, that's just
that's
an
just
absurd amount of money.
bonkers.
Um, yeah, at any rate, he
So
started
he
his
got
bakery
enough
from that.
money out of his insurance scam to start a business and buy a plane,
Yes, to do both of those things.
which in the picture looks like a Piper Cherokee or a similar model.
That I would not know.
I've
Yeah.
flown one of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Flown it, not flown in it.
flown
Oh,
left
cool.
seat.
That's awesome. That's another thing too. Hansen did not have a pilot's license, even though he had a plane.
And you know what? You go to some small airfield, there's nobody there to check you.
Oh yeah, yeah. And apparently his other trick was with the identifying markings
Yeah.
on the plane. He would paint them absurdly small to where there's no way you could read them. And
Uh,
then when he would fly past one of the towers, when I guess they ask you to identify, is that
yeah,
what they do?
right.
He would just feed them some false information,
Jesus.
and they took it. So, I mean, this guy is very much a grifter and manipulator.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cindy
Man, he
Paulson,
and Bundy could have shared notes.
yeah. Now, if only Bundy could have learned how to drive.
He would
Yeah.
have been caught a lot faster in a plane. You
Yep.
can't get away with shitty flying except once.
Oh, this is true. This is very true. But yeah, so apparently after he kept her, raped and tortured in his house for hours, surrounded by animal heads,
Hmm.
he puts her in the car and he says, "Okay, we're going to go to my plane and I'm taking you, somewhere out of the way to my sex cabin or what have you." Which, to my understanding, he did not own anything like that, but he would like break into him or what have you.
Maybe they belong to a buddy or somebody else, or who knows. Maybe
Yeah,
he spotted him from the air or something.
yep. But they do that, and once they get to the airfield, she sees him loading a lot of the stuff in the plane, and that's when she makes a break for it and
Ah,
starts running. That's how she got away.
wow.
Yep.
That's not all that, that's very reminiscent of the woman who got away from Bundy in Utah. Although she literally fought him off in the Bundy case.
Hmm.
But,
Yeah, I don't think Cindy Paulson did that much with
right, she
Hansen,
just took
but
advantage of a moment. Um,
hmm
but, running off screaming, flagging down a passerby, all
yep,
both of those things happened in both cases.
yeah, and and
And they led to the arrest of the perpetrator.
they did. And more importantly, though, with the Paulson side of that, they led to Robert Hansen being placed as one of the names on the task force's list
Mm,
of men to look at. They were up to about 24 by now. Um, so, but what was another thing that really grabbed me there, considering that this was Alaska?
yeah,
Hansen was the only guy on that list to have a plane.
right. Yeah, you typically hired it out.
Hmm.
I mean, if you needed to go somewhere, you would get a bush pilot. And I'll tell you why. And that is flying in Alaska is fucking harder than anywhere else in the country.
Yeah.
Because um, you know, you've got to fly year round in some really nasty conditions and land in really sketchy uh, pieces of ground.
It's man.
So it's not, uh, you know, bush pilots are highly sought after in the lower 48 because them guys got skills.
Yeah, this is true. Uh, yeah, man. So they put him on that list there. They put her in protective custody. In the
Hmm.
meantime, um, and they put him on surveillance for as long as they could with no new evidence. So that same year, What does the task force do? They call the FBI
Oh.
for any help that they can get from the Investigative Support Unit, was the name at the time. And who answers the phone with us? John Douglas, the prolific profiler, the guy who the Ford character on Mindhunters is based off of, is John Douglas. And he answers, and first thing he tells them when they start to feed him a little bit of info about suspects is, don't say anything about that. Tell me about the victims, and I'll tell you about the suspect.
Fascinating.
So that's what they do. And, he says, this is a white male, 30s to 40s. He's a respected community member, a business owner, most likely, an avid hunter, most likely. And I thought this was amazing. I'm still trying to figure out how they got to it. The exact thing they put in the profile was may have a stutter or a lisp.
Okay, so that's like Penn and Teller shit. Unless, some of the witnesses mentioned that and they passed that along.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I mean, that is just so weird.
otherwise, how the hell do you come up with that for a profile? That's
I would
mind-boggling.
love to ask him what bit of info it was that triggered them to say that. Unless they just got insanely lucky with that one.
Well, and almost as big of a leap is the business owner aspect. Shit.
Yeah?
Sorry, Google thought
Oh,
I
no
was talking
worries.
to her.
Yeah, shut up, Google. But
Uh,
yeah, I mean, they knew about Hansen, but they didn't pass along any info about him to the FBI when
wow.
they did the profile.
Right. Oh, right. So when you say he said just tell me about the victims, he wasn't getting any information about the unsub. So that
No
would not
info
have
about
been.
that.
So he just fucking put that together somehow.
Yeah,
A
because I,
business owner with a stutter or a lisp. Jesus Christ.
yeah,
I mean, up to that point, you're like, yeah, okay, so this is like half of the male population in Alaska.
yeah. Oh, exactly.
But then he gets just mind-bogglingly specific.
Yeah. I mean, like you had said earlier, that's like saying he had a pet snake, and it was true.
Yeah.
It just, I, man, it's just amazing how they did that. But yeah, I mean, they put the profile together, and while they were doing this, something just didn't sit right with that officer, Greg Baker, who I mentioned, who was the one who first interviewed Cindy Paulson.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first also to talk to Robert Hansen that same day. Something just didn't sit right with him. So while all this other stuff is going on, Baker is sifting through as many files as he can get his hands on in the state capitol and in Anchorage on Robert Hansen. And he ends up pulling all these different things that we touched on in the background of Hansen, all
Okay.
his little brushes with the law.
Oh, he starts bringing the pieces together.
Yes. And unfortunately, because there wasn't a actual open investigation with Hansen, he couldn't take that info to his superiors, to his direct superiors. He had to take it to the state police task force.
Oh, okay.
So he ends up doing that, and that info combined with Paulson's rape accusation and the psychological profile from the Bureau is what got them the search warrants, the comprehensive search warrant for Hansen's bakery, his house, his plane, and his car. And
Hmm.
so, what did they decide to do? October 26, 1983, is when they execute all those warrants and
Yeah.
they bring Hansen in for interrogation. And Douglas had another idea with that that I'm not sure how successful it was, but what he told them to do was prime Hansen in the interview room. Basically put up posters
Oh,
of all the different victims and the crime scene photos
yeah.
and, and just prime him, in there and see if that gets at anything quicker. And it really didn't, but
Okay.
they kept at it with the search at his house, and they weren't finding much, but then they came across a cache of weapons in his attic, and one of them was a 223 hunting rifle.
And it's only a cache of weapons outside of Alaska.
Yeah,
In,
well,
in Alaska, it's not even that much.
no different than owning snowshoes up there.
Yeah, yeah, and he doesn't even own all that many
Hmm.
when it comes right down to it. And
No, but they did find other evidence. I mean, they found his trophies up there too.
oh yeah, yeah. I'm just picking at the terminology that the media uses.
Hmm.
He has guns in a
Yeah,
box. It's not really a cache.
yeah, basically.
It's
But
where he keeps them.
yeah, they find, the women's jewelry and driver's licenses and business cards in a plastic bag up there too. And
Yeah,
meanwhile,
trophies, man.
and keep in mind, meanwhile, they're grilling Hansen still, and all he really admitted to was what he knew was on the public record. And that was, I used hookers, I never hurt one. Basically, all he said.
Hmm.
But, another interesting thing that they found when they were doing these searches was a map with various X's on it. I think we
All
might have a
right,
pic
yeah,
of it.
we definitely do. I've got this coming. I got this set aside. There we go. The, this is a aviation map.
The one in Hansen's plane. There is a total of 37 X's that were marked on this. And police started noticing that those X's coincided with where bodies were buried. Bodies they were finding were buried.
Oopsie.
Yeah. What does Hansen say meanwhile with that? He says, "Oh, yeah, I flew my plane around those areas. I even landed there. I went and I shot wolves for target practice," is what he said.
Which was legal.
Yeah, sure, but I don't think it's an
It's
explanation I would
it's
buy. But
yeah. Especially
yeah.
since these are yeah. I'm trying to. Oh, so these are the big circle centers the big dark circle with the flat side. That's the controlled airspace for Anchorage.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, saying that you that was for shooting wolves. You know why
Mm.
it's not plausible?
Why is that?
Because it's fucking. It's not open plains like you would get, say, um, to
Hmm.
the east or up in the permafrost. Well, I mean, never mind. It's all permafrost, but up around farther north of
Hmm.
Fairbanks, even when you're starting to get up towards Dead Horse, which
Mm.
is on the Bering Sea. Yeah, you get past those northern mountains, um, where it becomes more wide open. A lot easier to shoot a running animal than through the trees
Hmm.
and fjords.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't think about that. Yeah, they 37 X's on there.
Wow.
And they also, during this time, broke his alibi. When they told those two buddies of his what he was looking at, they folded pretty quick. Said that we were lying for him.
Well, they thought he was a good guy.
Yeah, they thought, yeah, basically. I think they might have thought that he was getting shook up, or, shooken down,
Yeah.
that is. But, yeah, they break him, and once that happens, the rest of it sort of goes downhill pretty fast. And Hansen ends up giving a full confession and describing how he would, his MO and the way that he would kill them. And he also ends up cutting a rather interesting deal, a plea bargain with prosecutors, saying basically, I will plead guilty to 4 counts of murder, but I want a trial with 0 publicity. I want my family left alone, and I want to be imprisoned outside of Alaska.
Did he get any of that?
He actually got most of it. And he was imprisoned outside of Alaska until, oddly, the end of his life. They moved him back to Anchorage, I think, a year or 2 before he died in
Really?
2014. Yeah, of natural causes.
A consideration that his victims did not enjoy, most of them?
Not at all. Not at all. And that number is still kind of in flux, too. Some people say it's 21, and the highest I've seen that he may have killed was 37.
That's, high or low numbers, those are atrocious figures.
Oh, yeah. And that's also where Douglas and the FBI have said he's one of the most prolific of all time
Yeah.
in the annals of American crime, basically.
Yeah, you think of, some of the more notorious ones, Zodiac, Son of Sam, Bundy. These guys, they were in the teens, number wise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, what's the average for a serial killer in this country? Like 8
Yeah,
victims?
yeah.
Hmm. So, any way you look at it, he's ahead of the curve. But yeah, he got 461 years plus life in prison. And
And
that's
without parole.
without parole, because there's no
So,
death penalty in Alaska at that time. There still might not be either.
yeah. We can talk about the death penalty again if you want, but we're pretty much in agreement on that.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it seems like there are times when you just want to pull that out and use it, but it's so often used on the wrong fucking people.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That's why I try not to argue it on moral points, on the morality
Yeah.
of a single case with it, because
Hell,
definitely
there
he
was just
deserved it.
a 70-year-old case that was overturned on DNA evidence just recently.
Yep,
And those guys were executed. It was 2 black boys that were executed.
man, it's horrible. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't say that Hansen didn't deserve the death penalty, but like I said, I don't think you can argue it on just one case either.
No, no. But there are, individual cases that you kind of feel like you want to do that sometimes.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
but it just gets used wrong too many times.
Too much, man. Too much of it can go wrong, and
Yeah.
has gone wrong, as you said.
And sometimes it's on purpose, and that's the worst thing. Sometimes it's
Man,
just, police doing the best they can, but sometimes it's just, you know,
yeah, malevolent,
yeah,
basically.
that's the word.
But, the hunter. I think Zodiac could have kicked his ass. This guy was
Well,
just.
he was
This guy's
kind
a
of he was
bullshit artist.
and a weenie. I mean, he was a hunter, but he was an emotional weenie.
He's total pussy. And like you were saying, if it wasn't for the fact that he was married, he'd be an incel,
He fits the
basically.
incel model so completely, except for the inconvenience of being married.
Oh yeah. In fact, when he gave his confession, that was the main thing that he bitched about and blamed for his bloodlust now, was women turning him down because he's pockmarked and stutters. You know, in fact, one of his rape victims described him as, quote, the perfect nerd.
Which is kind of funny because nowadays nerds do pretty well in the dating market because they got good jobs.
Yeah, they don't
They
burn down
can
bus
and
barns.
they can make decent money, just an average nerd. You don't even have
This
to
is
start a
true.
company.
This is very true.
Their stock is up.
Man. But yeah, I don't know.
But this guy was just messed up. And you know what's interesting is you don't and maybe it's because if this does happen, you never hear about it, but
Hmm.
you really don't see anybody, any of these guys and the few women who are like, I really feel like killing people would be fun, so I think I should like turn myself into somebody to stop me from doing that.
Yeah, really don't. I don't know if Hansen was capable of moral introspection.
Well, none of them are, right? They don't
True.
have, one of the you can't have a strong morality if you think people are, utilitarian.
This is true. You know, I think he takes the cake for the dumbest quote we've heard from a serial killer
Ooh,
on this
and
show.
what is that? What would that be?
You can't rape a prostitute, right? That was the quote.
You know, I gotta say, I think he's not alone in that belief,
Sadly. Very,
which is
very sadly.
which is one of the reasons why decriminalization of sex work needs to be, that shit needs to roll out because these women, and most of them are not trafficked, by the way.
Hmm.
Most women who are sex workers are doing it voluntarily, and especially in the internet age, they don't need a pimp.
No, not
Th-
at all.
They keep their own money. They do it by choice. Um, I mean, granted, their choices might be limited, but it's still they're doing it on purpose, right? They're not kidnapped into it. Most of them.
Oh, exactly. And you
But
might as well
but it,
get rid of the rest of the pimps too by just legalizing it so they're not afraid to go to the fucking cops
that's the
if they
thing.
get beat up.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, if they can't go and report crimes against themselves because what they're doing is illegal. And
Right.
so they can't go to the cops. So
Yeah.
these crimes against these women just, you know, keep going, keep
Yep.
happening. And God, we actually had one here in my city that was murdered.
Oh man.
And she was one of these back page girls.
Hmm.
And she was murdered outside her own apartment or in her apartment. I'm not sure which.
Backpage being the site that was shut down in 2014, was
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Shut down by the federal government. They were mainly a escort site for people who don't know.
right, right.
A lot of First Amendment issues with that
A
one too, I
lot of
think.
ones, a lot of them with that.
Yep. Man, I mean, I really hope they do legalize it. for those reasons.
Although we did have, yes, yeah, we did have a local guy who was running a escort website who was picked up on trafficking charges with some other guys because he was,
Hmm.
what an idiot. These guys were having a loud discussion about, and they actually were trafficking women from Korea.
Hmm.
Not the guy who ran the site,
Wow.
but these other guys who were using the site.
Hmm.
But but the guy who ran the site knew about it and was kind of financially involved with it. Um,
Hmm.
and they were in a fucking Starbucks talking about this shit, and somebody called the cops on him,
Wow. Dang.
and he ended up committing suicide over it
Sheesh.
before it even went to trial.
Man, crazy.
Yeah.
I'm
So
still,
what?
oh, I was just thinking, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around 37. What it ended up with the confession there was 17 murders he confessed to. They only found 12 bodies, and 30 rapes is what he confessed to. Robert Hansen.
He confessed to the ones that they found.
And he
Pretty
confessed to a total of 17 murders, but they only found 12 bodies.
And he had 27 marks on his map.
37, actually.
37 on his map.
Yep. And then 30 rapes was the rest of what he confessed to.
Wow.
But yeah, it's interesting. Apparently, he was shuffled from state prison to state prison until like 2012 when they put him up in Anchorage shortly before he died of an undisclosed illness, I might add.
Kelly
No,
asks, you see Kelly's question there?
yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with not giving up the locations, in as much as because of the environmental conditions on the ground and being, where it was, that there just wasn't anything left, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I mean, even if he did bury him, like the ones that they did found, they were not buried deep at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And if he hadn't, if he even at that, a shallow grave or no grave, and the wildlife would take care of
Removing the bones.
removing the body and scattering the bones, in a
Hmm.
very short order.
Yep. Yeah, because remember, they did have the X's on his map, too.
Hmm. It's one of the reasons they haven't found all of Bundy's victims, because
Oh, I imagine.
he dumped
Yeah.
them in some remote-ish, for here areas off of logging roads,
Yeah.
and we've got bear and coyotes and all manner of critters roaming around the woods who would have loved to pick at bones and haul them off to their dens.
Oh, absolutely. And just thinking about, I still can't get over what a pussy he was, too. Robert Hansen.
Yeah,
And almost a cartoonish caricature, you know? I mean, let's take all the sport out of it when we're doing it. Let's kill women so I can prop up my fragile ego. I don't know why, but he's getting under my skin more than these guys usually do.
well, what was his? Some of these guys that we've looked at, you know, you hate what they did, but on some level, you kind of understand why because of the
Yeah.
shit they went through. And this guy doesn't really have all that much to complain about.
No. No,
Is
I
that
mean
is that
even
the thing?
his
Is
yeah,
that
I
what's
mean
getting
even
you?
his dad.
Yeah,
Even his dad was, well liked in the community. He was stern, but he wasn't, like evil. Like,
right,
let's say on the level of Augusta Gein, you
right,
know?
right.
Yeah, he doesn't have anything to complain about. You're right.
I mean, and he was born in, would you say 32 or 39?
39. Yep.
In a fairly rural part of the country
Mm-hmm.
where kids all across the country were waking up before dawn to work on their farms
Oh, yeah.
every fucking day from the time you can carry a milk pail, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Kids
I mean,
were
it's
being,
northern Iowa. Yeah.
yeah,
You
you
know?
lived on a farm, you worked.
Eh, I think there's something else that's really bugging me about him. And that's also how he tried to use the acne and the stuttering
Mm,
to explain it. To say, "Oh, look at me, woe is me."
right,
I've lived with a very pronounced hand tremor my whole life. I know how that is.
right.
To when you have something that makes you feel inferior around people, but I would never let it get to this level. I would never even let it under my skin to the level of,
I,
you know,
do you
that he
mind me?
did.
Do you mind me asking? Did girls ever make fun of it? The
Oh
hand
yeah,
tremor?
sure they did.
But
Sure they did.
and you, of course now you hate women, right?
I mean, I think that might be what's really getting me about him too. Is that he's using it as he's trying to use it as a false crutch,
No, it's a
if you
real
will.
crutch.
Yeah, a real crutch.
um, yeah, it's a it's so incel.
Yeah.
I mean,
It.
y- Kemper. One of the things Kemper and Bundy both talked about how they really didn't get women at all,
Mm-hmm.
and how that ate away at them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that if they could have just figured out women, which like, come on, dudes, nobody's figured out women.
Yeah.
Get in
Exactly.
line.
Or if they could have just seen with an unbiased eye how they really communicated with people, you know?
Right.
So I mean, they were both affable guys, I think,
They
up
were.
until what
Yeah.
they were doing.
I mean, and
But
Bundy had girlfriends. He
yeah,
eventually got married while he was on death row. Um, so
I honestly think Kemper could have
he
been
knew
that way too.
enough. I could see that with Kemper was a very loquacious guy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they weren't little bitches like this guy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe this is it. Those guys, even though they ended up being also serial killer assholes, they at least were trying to, understand women
Yeah,
and have social interactions with them on a normal uh, plane. But this guy was just like, man, they don't like me. Let's go shoot
yeah,
them.
yeah. I mean, that was essentially it.
Yeah,
I loathe this guy on so many different levels. It's hard to fathom.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, uh,
You know, one of the things that occurred to me about his MO was like in that location is, he didn't even have to shoot him. You go
no.
drop him off in the wilderness and just leave him there.
Oh yeah,
Leave him fully dressed, uncuff him, and then leave.
yeah.
Right? They'd
Look,
never be found.
no, not at all. And even with something like that, like we were saying, he took the sport out of it. We know for a fact he left them blindfolded when he shot them. And I would imagine if there was still any meat left on those corpses when they found them, you would find ligature marks where the cuffs were too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I said, there's just so much about this guy that just irritates me on a visceral level.
And Kelly says, there are loads of single women out there not killing people. To which I
Yeah?
say, that we know of. They might just be better at it.
Yeah, probably.
Because, women have different preferences when it comes to murder, generally speaking.
That they do, which very much includes ways that are a little bit easier to conceal too, like
Exactly.
poisoning.
Right?
Yep.
Unless Lorena Bobbitt didn't actually kill her husband, but she gave him a good whack.
Yeah.
That was not subtle.
Yeah. Wow.
And Eileen Warnos was not subtle. But generally speaking, throughout history, women have chosen much more, I want to say, cunning or devious or subtle uh, MOs for their murder.
Yep. No, you're exactly right with that. Although interestingly, they don't often choose those when they do the suicide route.
Right.
They often go with the more theatrical for that.
Yeah, good point, Kelly. The two lizards that we talked about last week. Axes are not generally the weapon of choice for women. Those
Nope.
two were quite exceptional in that regard.
Yep.
By the way, did anybody ever suspect a woman as Jack the Ripper?
That's a good. Where have I heard that before?
I don't know, it just popped into my head.
I thought I'd read something to that degree. Ask Kelly. Kelly will know.
Yeah, Kelly would know.
Was Jack the Ripper really a woman? From the Vintage News. I don't know, man. A woman being that strong to do what he did to those victims, though.
Well, the thing is, well, some women, Victorian age, some women did some hard fucking labor, right?
This is true.
A lot of people did hard fucking labor even in those days. It was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but a lot of work was still uh, crushingly physical.
Yeah, that's the same argument with Reverend Kelly in Villisca, being as he was a diminutive guy.
Mm,
Could he have
yeah.
dispatched 8 people with an axe?
Well, yeah. It's you know, it's not unthinkable at all, even for a small guy. Just because you're small, you can be wiry, you can be strong. I've seen some really tough. Well, hell, the Scots.
Oh, yeah. My dad's like that, actually. Uh,
Oh yeah, that's right. Lizzie Halliday. We actually talked about this last week. Lizzie Halliday was considered a suspect for Jack the Ripper momentarily.
oh, I thought we were talking seriously considering a woman.
No, I
She wasn't
mean,
seriously, was she?
well, no, I mean, it was. I think the question of her possibility had been raised, but it didn't go very far.
Eh. I still think the most absurd one I've heard was that Jack the Ripper was H.H. Holmes.
Right. And there's no record of him ever even being in the country, right?
No, no, not at all. It was the History Channel doing some such absurdity with that.
Well, he maybe if he used a pyramid to teleport, to London and back. That seems like something the History Channel would consider plausible.
Yeah. No, Jack the Ripper was a dyed-in-the-wool lust killer, and Holmes just wasn't that. And he did occasionally kill for that, but Holmes was more than a lust killer.
Right. He killed because he liked it. He liked
Yeah,
the killing.
but he also would, rob
Yeah, he was all
people.
he really did it. He started off doing it for money, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he could take their things or
I think,
insurance fraud. He also
yeah,
did.
I think whenever I think of criminal genius, the closest one that comes to mind is him, H. Holmes.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of a
mean,
real life Professor Moriarty.
I mean, not many. He's the only one I can think of that actually built his own fucking lair, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah. Yeah, and he built it efficiently. It was
Purpose
efficient at what it
built.
did.
Purpose
Yep.
built.
Yep.
Everybody else just, takes the bodies and gets rid of them best they can. This dude built a factory.
Yeah. Literally.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Robert
I think
Hansen was a scumbag
Yeah.
and a
I think we
weenie.
beat the hell out of the Alaska incel.
Yeah. And one more time, what the fuck, 70s?
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
Go see Alaska, though.
I might have to do that. I could never live up there though.
It's so dark.
Yeah, that would drive me crazy. The cold too, but yeah, that.
Yeah, I got when I lived in Sweden, it was um, about the same um, latitude as Anchorage, and
Hmm.
you know, during the during the winter, the sun would come up around 9:30 ish and be
Oh
gone by
wow.
3:30.
Man, I could not take that. My opinion, humans just were not designed to live in that.
Yeah, some people have adapted quite well,
Hmm.
quite well.
Although both versions of Insomnia are good too. You ever see that movie?
Was that okay? So what was the movie that
That
was about Hansen? Insomnia?
that no, it wasn't Insomnia. The one about Hansen had Nicolas Cage in it, and I'm blanking on the title. But Insomnia first started off as a Swedish detective investigating a serial
Uh,
killer at the Arctic Circle, and then
yeah.
they remade it with Al Pacino and Robin Williams. Both versions of it are superb.
I've seen that version. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the life of me, I am blanking on the Nicolas Cage movie with something Frozen, probably.
All right.
I'm looking right now. I know I'll see it when I read
Frozen
it.
moose something.
And who was it called him like the jazz musician of actors? Nicolas Cage.
That's way too much credit for him.
Oh, I wonder if it wasn't the Frozen Ground.
Something like
There's a
that. By the way, we didn't cover this. Just another one of the other examples of the bigness of Alaska. I did a little comparison. And if you got in a car in Portland, Maine, and you drove to Syracuse, New York, which it covers, I don't know, 4 states, something
yeah.
like that, that would, in that same amount of time, you could almost drive from Anchorage to Fairbanks.
Wow. Dang. Huge, huge country, man.
Big place. Alrighty, let's call it quits, man.
Yeah, I think we beat the hell out of the incel.
The married
Yay!
incel.
Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.